Hey there, it's Robin, and you're listening to the Healthy Habits for Midlife Mamas. This podcast is all about you, your health, your wellness, and making those 1% shifts that can transform your life one step at a time. Here, we're going to explore simple, holistic strategies to help you thrive and not just survive in this beautiful midlife chapter. From whole foods and movement to mindset shifts and spiritual grounding, I'm going to guide you through all of it so that you can feel your best inside and out. If you are ready to reclaim your energy and make wellness a priority, you're in the right place. And if you're loving what you hear, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps me and you to reach more women just like us. Now, let's dive in and see what we can find. Hey y'all, super excited to be back today. We're going to be talking with Jen Heller. She has a lot of wisdom to share, and I cannot wait to have this conversation. We chatted a little bit before we hit record, and my energy is just going up, up, up because I know it's going to be so good. So welcome, Jen. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you. Grateful to be here.
Jen, I know a little bit about you, but if you want to talk a little bit about your health story, because I think that's one of the things I love on the show is that we talk about our stories because people resonate with that and we can help people by our experiences.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think our stories are usually the catalyst or the beaming light why we get into doing our life's work and our passion. And for me, as you know, we were chatting about before we hit the record, I got into the health and wellness, holistic health space, particularly infrared saunas and heavy metal detoxification, not because I find it fun and interesting, although I do. It's really it was for a matter of my health, like life and death. I was on this path of trying to figure out how I could lose some weight. I knew that there was something wrong. I felt really off, like I kind of out of body experiences. I was having some symptoms of like fatigue and lethargic. I was in kind of a relationship that wasn't serving me well. I had this like overarching feeling of something was off. So I started some discovery of blood work, like what's going on. Figured out something was going on with the thyroid, but as I dug deeper into it and did some muscle testing, I found out it was heavy metal toxic, mercury and lead. And not just a little toxic. It had crossed the blood-brain barrier. It was a high level, and it was a serious situation.
So I want to stop just for 1 second, just because already I'm like, oh. So a couple of things I just want to bring to light for people. If you're new to this kind of conversation, if you haven't really talked about or heard about detoxification and all of that. Number one, I'm so happy for you that you didn't just get a thyroid issue diagnosis and just go with that you actually did some more digging to find a root cause, because there's always a root cause as to why one of our systems is off. And right. I think in Western medication, we don't take that extra step to try to figure that out. And you just treat the organ, you just treat the system. And so if you had just done that and you didn't know about this heavy metal stuff, you wouldn't be where you are today. You'd still be suffering.
Oh, no. I'd still be overweight. I would be missing my thyroid, which was one of their suggestions with surgery. And I'd be on a lifelong medication, which they were very clear about. It was a prescription, removal of thyroid, and then the weight loss and the blood work and the other things were just like, oh, that stuff's going to come once we fix this. And the woman I was working with and talking to, the practitioner, she was very kind, very sweet, well-intentioned woman. But I just remember thinking like, I'm 27 years old. You want me to be on a medication forever? Like, I don't like, you're going to just cut my throat open and then and then I'm just on my way. Like the whole thing, I remember sweating. I remember feeling like, yeah, I'm going to just take a beat to figure this out. And I went out to my car and I remember sitting there. It was hot. It was really hot. And I remember sitting in my car thinking, I'm not going to do that. There has to be another way. This cannot be the only way to do this. And I'm going to figure it out. And just a few days later, I was actually telling the story to one of my girlfriends. We were hanging out one evening and she's like, oh, well, are you familiar with this practitioner in town who does muscle testing? Maybe she could help. She's like, I actually have a card in my purse for a free consultation to give out to my friend. She's like, my husband is seeing her for Lyme's disease and she's phenomenal. And I was like, yeah, what the hell? Like, what do I have to lose? I'm going to go a different path. Let's go down this discovery. And I mean, totally different path, never looked back.
If you're someone listening, you've never had muscle testing, YouTube it, look it up because it's real. It works. I have firsthand experience. Also, my children do. It's an incredible tool that I have no idea why isn't it used more often. I have no clue, but it is like my thyroid actually didn't show anything. But my whole family had thyroid issues. And I'm like, something has to be wrong here. Like, I'm not gaining weight, and I ended up going to a facility that did muscle testing. And she was like, yeah, your thyroid's off. And I'm like, help me make sense of this. And why aren't my labs showing that? And this
Right.
was way, way early on. And she's like, because the lab only shows the draw in your arm. Like it's not showing the function of your thyroid. And I was like,
Right.
oh, that makes sense. Like, okay. And that was my first kind of like, aha, there's a lot more out there than, beats the eye. So continue on because I'm very fascinated.
Yeah, and the muscle testing I did, I just want to mention, is called NRT, nutrition response testing.
Yes,
There are a few different kinds and types, MFT, morphogenic field. I in particular used NRT.
me too. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So from there, I mean, basically, like I said, I went in and I actually went to this practitioner, not fully, to be totally honest, like I wasn't fully gonna like spill all the beans, if you will, and say, here's everything
Mhm.
that's going on. Because I'm like, I'm a little skeptical. I'm not,
Yeah.
this is new to me. This was
Yeah.
15 years ago. I didn't know. And so I was like, I'm going to tell her about my weight loss. And, it's very clear. I was well over 100 pounds overweight. I clearly wasn't healthy. I needed to talk to her a little bit about just like the symptoms of the sleep and the fatigue and the things that were like real, but just kind of go at it. Like I didn't really tell her about the thyroid thing. I didn't tell her that I had this other work. I wanted to see if she can get it. Well, 5, 10 minutes in, she puts the hand over the thyroid. Boom, my arm
Boom.
goes down. I could feel it. I was like, what the heck? What the
Mm.
heck was that? She's
Right.
like, oh, she's like, your thyroid is trash. She's like, let's figure this out. And she starts flipping all these different things, doing all these testing. And within minutes, she says mercury and lead. She's like, it's crossed the blood-brain barrier. You've got a severe situation here. And she did some more testing and she said, let's talk about where we go from here. And then I was like, okay, now you have my attention.
Yeah. And I want to
So,
explain really quick just what muscle testing, kind of how it works in a layman's term. But when you are pushing on somebody's arm, and you can also do it between ring finger and thumb, when somebody pulls it apart or pushes on your arm, you resist. But when there is a spot in your body that is not well, it is not functioning properly, or if you're allergic to something, or if like a supplement's not right for you, and you come close to it, your arm drops because
yeah.
your body cannot do two things at once. And it's going to always go to what is not well in your body first, is how she explained it to me. And I tell you, Jen, I would try my hardest to fight against that. I'm like, there's no way that this is accurate. Like, and my chiropractor does it too. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, Robin, for all your, like you resist.
Hold
And it's
it.
like, boom, your heart. And it's just like, how
Same.
cool is that?
I did the same. And so Ashley, my friend, my practitioner, she always calls it a block. And I like
Mhm.
that term because it's a block in the energy system.
Sure.
Basically, it's a
Yep.
block that's not getting correct function. But I was the same way. My arm went down and I could feel it. So there was like no doubting it. But I was like, wait a minute, we're going to do that again. And I like
That's right.
situated myself on the table, put my arm up really strong. She giggled. She's like, okay. And then it was like, boom. And even when you're trying to fight it, I know you know this, like you can feel it. You can feel the
Yep.
resistance. And the more you get dialed in and you're in tune to your body, and if you're being honest with yourself, like there's no
Yep.
fighting it. It's just there. And so right then and there, kind of fast forward, I said, okay, where do we go from here? That's where we introduced a couple specific supplementation to support the thyroid and to support the organs. But that's where infrared saunas came into my world. She said, you need an infrared sauna or access to one. In her words, this is the safest, most effective way for you to draw the metals out through the skin, as well as support the organs in the body while we try to process it through what we call our dumpster organs, basically like the liver, the kidney, and all
Mhm.
of the things. So it was a process. It was not overnight. It took me about 9 months to walk through everything. And I was working with her, kind of guided every few weeks or every couple weeks, depending on how the tests were going. I'd have to go back in and get retested. Where do we go from here? It absolutely is not like here's some supplements and go do this and we'll see you in 6 months. It was a very specific regimen that I followed. And along the way, all of the other things that I was looking to shape up in my life transformed, right? I got
Yeah.
really serious about my food. I started removing sugar. I started removing the bad habits. I started moving my body. I literally just kind of started just started walking, started meditating, thinking through like, okay, what else can I do to be supportive? I was scared, like I was pretty scared. And then the weight just started to fall off. And then I started using the sauna every day pretty much. Obviously, I got one for my home because it was important for me to just use it on a consistent basis. Consistency was key. I started using the sauna space as like my go inward, like starting asking myself tough questions, like what do I do? Where else can I clean up my life? What else can I do? And it just rolled. It just completely transformed my life.
So there's a couple of things I want to hit on really quick.
Sure.
You know, if you are somebody that, you know, light bulbs are going off and you're very interested in this, sauna is definitely a tool and a practice to be used, but you should always see a practitioner first, because if you have heavy metals in your body and your lymph systems, not your drainage systems are not open and working properly, and you start expelling things and then there's nowhere for it to go. If your kidneys aren't functioning, if your liver's not processing, if your dumpster stuff isn't working, you can actually make yourself sicker. So I love sauna. I think it's amazing, but you have to be ready for it. And so working with a practitioner who has some experience would definitely be the route I would suggest if you're interested in this. And I think once you're starting on that path of healing, right, like you were, other things just start to come up. And that's where, when I went back to school to become an integrative health coach, I love the philosophy of the school that I went to, because it's not just the food on your plate. It is what they call primary foods, which is everything off your plate that feeds your soul. That matters with your health. And so when you can start to delayer and ask yourself those tough questions, like, where else in my life can I add value? Where can I delete out things that are not serving me anymore? And I think when people can start just taking very small shifts, baby steps, I call them 1% shifts, you know, just a step forward, you know, it's just one step at a time. You're not going to ever get an overnight transformation, because that's not what a transformation is. That's called a quick fix, and it doesn't stick, and it won't stick because you haven't done all the other work, internal and external. So, I love your journey so far. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I didn't get to be over 100 pounds overweight overnight, and I certainly was not thinking it was just going to fall off. Now, granted, I'm not going to lie, I wish I prayed for that a few times, like, you know, and it was not always easy, and there were days that were really, really tough, but I love your 1% shift. I've lived by that rule kind of my whole life, and that's how Ashley kind of started with me as well. She said, we're not changing 1,000 things right now. We're going to change like 3. And the first thing you're going to start doing is you're going to stop eating ice cream at night, because that's not serving you. That's pouring gas on a fire. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to use sauna every day. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to take these supplements, and you're going to promise me that we're going to continue this path together, that you're not going to go it alone. So to your point, 100%. Sauna, I mean, sauna heat therapy's been around for hundreds of years. It's not new. Sauna bathing, like anybody can do it. But if you're working through mold toxicity, or you suspect that you have some sort of metal toxicity or some sort of exposure, you absolutely need to get with somebody who can help guide and test you and walk you through that process, because you can absolutely give yourself more problems than good, for sure. And in my case, that was certainly the case. And I was grateful for her, because there was so much I didn't know. There's no way I would have been able to walk that path and be successful in it without A, her knowledge, B, her support, and C, just the accountability and like the love and the kindness along the way. I had somebody in my corner, and it felt so good. It was like a nourishing experience to know that if I didn't know something, I would write down my questions, and then I would go talk, you know, I get to see her every week or 2 or 3, and we'd go through it. So I had an understanding, and she was real with me. And that's literally, as you know, my story. I ended up getting divorced. I quit my job. I hit the reset button on a lot of things, because things start bubbling to the surface. Like, where else are these boundaries that I've completely blurred the lines? Why is my life so toxic? Why is my life so stressful? How did I let this get out of hand? And I didn't, again, I didn't like throw a grenade in my life. All I did was take a step back and started making a list, and started making some small shifts, and like prioritizing what I could manage at that time. So,
and I think that's exactly, it's like meeting yourself where you are. And I think sometimes just the value in making the list can be so good, because then you kind of have, first of all, you expel it out of your brain. So you're no longer having to ruminate, think about it, make the spiraling effect happen. And then it gives you kind of like a to-do. And it might not be a to-do like where you're going to check everything off in a day, but at least you have some kind of a questionnaire to say, is this still serving me? Is this not serving me? If it's not, what do I do? Where do I create boundaries for myself so that I can protect my space, my energy, and my health and wellness? So, and I like to use the word wellness, because I think health sometimes has a ping for some people. And so wellness is like, you are creating the wellness you want. You know, we all want to be well, but we have to find the tools, the tips, the things, the procedures, you know, the processes, all of the things that work for us. And we're all bio-individuals. So what works for you is not going to work for me. Your illnesses are different than my illness, you know, but what we all have in common is we're a multi-layered being. And so we have to address all of the layers in order to find that sustained lifestyle of
Yeah.
wellness.
Yeah, 100%. I use the term health, obviously health and wellness, health and
Sure.
fitness. It's
Yep.
definitely there, but I'm with you because I think our wellness is a state of being and
Mm-hmm.
well-being. I think when I say let's talk about your wellness, that feels a little deeper, right? That feels a
Mm-hmm.
little more, I don't think warm and cozy, but you invoke a feeling on it when you just say I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about your health. Well, I mean, the health of what? The state of what? It seems a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more surface level to me. Wellness is what's going to bring you joy? What brings you peace? What is going to allow you to sleep at night? Your
Yeah.
health just feels differently to me. So
Just feels
I
like your
also,
departmentalized organs. That's what it
yeah,
reminds me of. But to your point of like joy and all of that, when you were taking inventory of your life, your career
mhm.
is part of your wellness. Your
Oh
relationships
yeah,
are part of your wellness, your joy, your spirituality. All of those things are things off your plate that feed your soul, but
hmm,
it's still inclusive of your wellness.
right.
So you could eat salad all day long and have the cleanest diet, and you're in a toxic relationship and a soul-sucking career, you're not well.
Mm, yeah. Well, exactly. Two things I want to say to that. First of all, I want to mention when I talk about lists, and I had talked a few minutes ago about what I do in my sauna. For me, it was in my sauna space. For anybody else listening who doesn't have a sauna or use it the way I do, it doesn't matter. It's a place in your home. It could be your car. It could be
It's my
a place
my
of
yoga
prayer.
mat.
It's your yoga mat. It's your meeting with yourself in the morning. One of the things I like to suggest is however that looks like to you, whether it's journaling, whether it's writing a list or creativity, it's just putting down on paper the downloads and the thoughts that are going through our mind. And that's where I actually started to actually get real with the problems and the situations and the solutions in my life is when I actually started putting pen to paper, because
Mm-hmm.
before they were just rattling around in my head. But when I started writing them down, it's like, okay, and I'm an organizer type person. When I started writing it down, it was like, okay, now I'm creating myself, I don't say tasks, but now I'm giving myself some actionable items to work on. Now I'm a little bit more accountable to myself because I'm writing this down. I'm aware that this friendship is no longer serving me. I'm aware that my husband and I are not on the same page and we don't have the same long-term visions. Okay, where do we go from here? What do we do
Mm-hmm.
with that? So that was really powerful for me because I certainly wasn't doing that. And that was more of a spiritual connection with myself and
Mm-hmm.
listening to myself. Huge, huge step, something I wasn't doing prior to that. So that was a big awareness. And from there, as you know, I had mentioned, I don't know if we hit record or if I've already said this, but I ended up having a stroke. Even after I lost the weight, even after I was on the right path, I wake up one day and I'm paralyzed on the left side. So there's another warning shot to me to go back to the spiritual component. I still had some work to do. I still had some things. I had been working on some physical, but there were some things like I was married, I was with an alcoholic. So that's that, that's the main thing. There's a lot of stress and discomfort in a lot of sleepless nights, and my sleep was very much interrupted, and it was causing a lot of stress, like overarching stress in my life. So I wasn't listening to that. Well, now
Mm-hmm.
I have my own attention.
Right.
So now it's a bit more of an urgency. I don't want to say to chase my health backwards, but now I'm getting real clear on what's going on in my life because now I've just lost some function and I have to figure out what's going on. Well, there are a few components to it. The heavy metals and some damage was part of it, but also rewind back up to my when I was a teenager and actually witnessed a pretty traumatic situation that caused a concussion to my brain. So now I'm digging deeper into some layers of why is the body, when we go back to wellness and well-being, again, not surface level. Now I'm digging deeper to time in my life of an untreated situation where I didn't listen to my body and I didn't actually take care of something that has now surfaced. So I know there's a lot to unpack with that. We could probably do a whole nother show, and I can see you want to say say a few things, so I'll let you in.
Well, I want to let people know that are listening, this is what it looks like when you're getting well. It is a process, and you will have dips, and your body will only bring up things when you're ready for them. And sometimes we listen to them and sometimes we don't. And when we don't, it will get louder
Yeah,
and it will get louder, and it will get to a point where you do not have a choice and you must listen, because now in your case, half your body wasn't working. In some people's
right.
cases, they just have every illness in the book, but what I love about your story is that you were making progress, right? You were on the path, but you hit something where your body felt like it was ready to handle going back to your childhood and feeling and seeing something and figuring that part out. And so again, when you're on a path of transformation and to create wellness, you have to expect that it's going to be bumpy because we have life. We've lived a lot of life and we've had a lot of things put on us at an early age that never served us probably, but definitely aren't serving us now. And so we've got to rewind and dig. And so it is giving yourself permission to get back in touch with yourself. And there is something about the brain to pen to paper that makes things conceptual, like conceptualizes things in a way that you can then look at them as action items and then say, now I've got to get busy, So a lot of times when we are ignoring things, and we're kind of suppressing them and not doing, it's still doing this in the brain because your brain's always working, right? I mean, you can meditate and your brain's still thinking. So if you're not putting things out, and I remember when I was pregnant, it was like, I'd wake up with like 100 different things going on and I would just have a pen and paper and I would just write it all down. Otherwise I would never go back to sleep because I kept thinking about, oh, I got to remember that in the morning. I don't remember that. It's like, so there is something to be said about getting it out of your head and onto paper, and then you can release it. When you had your stroke, what did that look like as far as, it pointed obviously backwards to something else. And so being the root cause, how did you work through that? Because obviously you're not paralyzed today.
Right. It's easy for me to assess now. This was 10 years ago, right? Or 12 years ago now. I've got a much clearer picture now, understanding it, obviously. And as you mentioned, I've healed my body back to whole at this point. At the time, I had some symptoms leading up to it that I ignored, which again, as you so beautifully put, this is a process, this is a transformation. Not all of the information and feedback is rainbows and unicorns and lovely and productive, or not productive, but beautiful, right? Or, it's not like everything is always positive. This was something that was brewing and it was something from years ago. And the way I see it now is that at that time, my body was ready to handle and process something that should have been handled when I was, when I experienced the trauma. I'm grateful, honestly, that it didn't take my life completely, of course. I was able, so basically it affected the left side. So from my shoulder down to my arm, my hand was in a fist, and from my knee down to my foot. So I technically could function, but I drugged my left foot and my hand. I had to like move my arm and hand around with my right hand. What's interesting is that I wasn't quite sure what was going on at the time. I did not go to the hospital. I went to bed. I actually had the stroke. I went down on some stairs. I didn't quite understand what was going on. I had gone up to my room and went to sleep, and I woke up the next day, and that's when I was paralyzed. So I actually called some friends and some practitioners of mine and said, I think something has happened. I'm not quite sure. I thought maybe I'd pinched a nerve. Maybe the stress had just gotten to me. I didn't really realize the magnitude of the situation at the time. It took me a few days for us to gather some more information. And then it was like, oh, wow, okay, you've had a mild stroke and here's where we go from here. So the lessons in it were to address not the stress factors essentially, but address the multifaceted layers of when you're on a transformation like this, that it's body, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
And so there were a couple of key components. I'd mentioned who I'm married to now, my now husband was struggling and dealing with alcoholism. There were some very serious issues that needed to be addressed. And so instead of sweeping them under the rug, I essentially whipped the rug out the window and was like, okay, now we're going to handle these. It's time to handle these situations. And so it was just one of those circumstances where I looked at it, why is this happening for me, not to me? I needed to take a step back. Of course, I had a few days. Again, I remember my car seems to be like my rolling phone booth and like sometimes your solitude space. But I remember after a few assessments, I had seen an acupuncturist, I had seen tons of MRIs and CAT scans and a lot of medical doctors. All roads point to the same direction. I remember sitting in my car thinking, I know what I need to do here. Like, I know in my gut why this happened. I've got all the answers. Now I just need to put the pieces back together. So it was just getting with the right resources, the practitioners, handling the circumstances at hand. My husband's been sober now for many years. We actually both live a sober life, which is great. I did not have a drinking or alcohol problem at the time. However, in order for our relationship to grow and be healthy, I let that go as well, which was actually one of the best things that I could have done for myself. But it was just, again, going back to basics of the list of things that we need to do to move forward. At that time, also prioritizing my non-negotiables, making sure that I was taking more time for meditation and yoga, nature, getting out into some things that I had let go while we were living in the city at that time. So it was literally selling our home, getting back into nature, bringing some modalities into my house, like an oxygen chamber and a few other modalities to help rewire the brain, and getting extremely serious about putting my well-being first and above everything else. And so that's really what it was. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, I have a podcast called Home Set Heal. Literally is in and all around how to create a wellness and sanctuary space that serves you and your wellness and your well-being, whatever that looks like. For me, it was heal from a stroke. So it's I think it's important for anybody who's getting those messages of areas of their life that they can clean up or just create a higher vibration, bring some more higher vibration into your life. Getting it under your roof or into your day-to-day it's just key. It's just so essential for us in our overall like long-term health.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think so oftentimes your home is forgotten.
Yeah.
It's not a place that we set up to be conducive for thriving and not just surviving. It's not a place where we bring things in that can help us. It's a place that we go and sleep and eat. And a lot of homes are full of stress and chaos. And so I think getting that component and that piece, your home environment is part of your wellness, right? I mean, your home cooking, if you never eat at home, if you're not bringing nutritious food in to fuel your body, all of that is part of creating longevity and wellness and thriving for yourself. So again, through her podcast, through her experience, I just invite you guys that are listening to take a look at your home environment, take a look at the things that you're bringing into your home and how does it serve you? Is it creating wellness for you or is it depleting you? I mean, there's energy givers and there's energy suckers, and it's like, you've got to figure out what is what for yourself, because again, it's going to look different. And an experience that I had personally, which really made me expand with the understanding of boundaries, is that in my home, I cannot have a lot of negative energy, like people that come in that are just super negative. It brings this whole nother dynamic, that at one time I wouldn't even have noticed, and I grew up in a family where, it was just loud. It was just, we were Italian and Jewish, and it was just everything was just loud, loud, loud. And so it wasn't something unusual to have a loud household. But what I recognize from that for me is that it makes my stomach like get into knots. And the loudness, even though it's not like quote unquote arguing or mean or whatever, there's just a tone about it. For some reason, my body's sensitive to it. And so, understanding that about what my needs were, and then as people enter my home, if I'm getting that gut feeling of like, this is just chaotic for myself, how is that relationship serving me? Is it when I want to have a conversation around with that person? Is it not? And once I started to get really clear and feel like I could come from an authentic lens, I can talk to people and say, when they talk negative, I can flip it and say, well, maybe look at it this way. It's like, you don't always have to be like half glass empty. Let's try to redo that. But it was very interesting for me to have that whole experience through being sick and then coming out of it and then recognizing like, that does not work for me anymore. And it probably never did, but I just wasn't aware that I had a different choice. I wasn't aware of the situation being that the cause of something, if that makes sense.
It does. I feel like that's what I can resonate with that, because when I look back and say, 20 years ago, there was a lot of that chaos and stuff going on, but it was like we were just complacent with it. Like I can resonate with the loud family and the chaos and all the things. That's just the norm. That's just what you're used to. And there comes a point in your life, and that's where this transformation is just so beautiful, because it's an evolution of when you really sit down and you make these changes, you start asking yourself, like, what's serving me? What's not serving me? That's everything. That's food. That's relationships. That's, your job. That's the car you're driving. That's the music you're listening to, the TV you're are not watching, like all the things, like where are we getting all the messages? And you use the term lens. I love that because we're looking through a lens, basically. We're always looking through a lens. And so what I realized, going back to the stroke and where I was, I had worked on the physical, I lost over 100 pounds. I was successful. I could check that box. But now I'm sitting on the floor going, whoa, okay, so there's some environmental things here I need to look into. At the time, like I said, we were living in the city. I was running a business, a wellness center, and I had all the things going on. But there was chaos. There was some chaos, and there was some things environmentally, everything from the loud traffic to an enormous amount of cellular towers and electro frequencies, neighbors. It was stress of the traffic, the interstate traffic. Like I literally started to peel back because again, this isn't just like, oh, I want to have a more harmonious life. It's, I don't have function of my body. Like what happened here that it just decided to say, check engine light, you're not okay. Like,
right. And it's interesting. And again, I feel like God's timing is everything, is he allowed you to find modalities and shift in your physical being so that you could maybe handle the stroke differently. Because maybe if you were back at the 100 pounds overweight, maybe you would not have done as well getting through that. There's always something to reframe when you are in a situation as to like why things happen in the order they happen or how they happen. And I think a lot of us are, we want to control situations. We want to know the outcome before the outcome is going to happen. It's like, I don't know what that is, but I think it's more female than male, but it's about releasing the grip. Release the grip of what you think you're going to control, because you're never going to control it, right? Never. It's not really up to us. And so go with what you have been given, utilize those and move forward through those. And then if something else arises, that will be the time to dig into that.
Yeah, you're 100% right. There's no way that I would have been able to handle this situation. And no doubt it was coming, right? Because the body, again, this was about a concussion on the brain. It's very obvious there was some very severe damage in some things. So it was definitely coming. The warning signs were there of the stroke or this situation. And I don't believe that I would have managed it as well, 100 pounds heavier and in the state of being, excuse me, that I was a few years prior to that. So I'm grateful that the cards were dealt to me when I could sit down and look at, okay, where do I go from here? Like, what do I do with this information? So grateful that I'm also deep into the wellness world at this point. Right. And I have every resource that I needed, that literally on speed dial, that I could call to certain people and say, here's what happened. What do I do? So I'm so fortunate in that way, where I was put in this position, or I was put in the position at a time when I had some resources I could reach to that could point and navigate me in the right direction.
Right. And I want to point out though, that you weren't born with those resources, and you didn't really have those resources until your back was against the wall. And then you started looking for different things. And I just want to encourage people that are listening that there's nothing against going to a regular doctor. There's nothing against procedures. There's nothing against some type of medicine for some things, but there's such a vast difference and a wide world of other modalities and opportunities that we don't talk about enough. And that is one reason why I wanted to do this podcast and have people on to talk about different things that have worked for them, because we're all searching. But if you're only searching in one lane, you're not going to get the best answers. You've got to be able to advocate for yourself. Take a little bit from this person. When you're done, leave it. Go to the next person. Go to the next. I'm like, don't be afraid to shift practitioners. Don't be afraid to go to one for a little bit when you feel like you've exhausted, because not everybody can know everything. So you're trying to put your body back together or bring your body up, in a thriving sense. You have to pick and choose what works for you. And it's not going to be just, if you just stay with one person only, it's going to be really hard to create that transformation. You've got to really dig into a bunch of different resources. It's body work. Could be therapy. It could be, chiropractic. It could be the ART or NRT. It could be getting on a better diet. It could be, figuring out if you love your career or not. A lot of these women that I work with in my community is midlife moms and empty nesters. And so it's like you're evolving into this new space. You're shifting again from one type of momming to a different type of momming, which gives you a little more time. And honestly, what comes up for a lot is fear, because it's like you haven't dealt with yourself in so long, or you've dealt with yourself very surfacey because you've been pouring yourself into everybody else's needs. We were taught that's kind of how it goes, and even if you are a working mom, sometimes you're just working to make ends meet, but then you come home and you still have your kids. And I'm not doubting dads, but it's just a different internal maternal being that we are.
Right.
You're never not thinking about what they need. And so I think all of a sudden when that kind of halts a little bit and they go off, which is amazing, I think that's, again, a reason why that's the transitional, path for children. And we just need to start talking about it sooner so that we're backing up. So we're coming through it a little bit differently. But now my generation is just at a point where, the career thing, I think, is really hard for some, because they wake up and they're like, what am I doing now? Right? Like, now I'm 50, midlife, I've gone, I've had the kids, I've done the thing, I'm empty nesting, and now I'm in this role. And do I is this even good for me anymore? And it's okay to say, maybe it's not, maybe it is, maybe it is a means to an end for your financial stability. And so if that's the case and you don't want to pivot to something, that's totally fine. Nobody's saying quit your job, but find joy in it. You got to reframe the situation to find the joy so that it's not energy sucking, so that you're not leaving every day depleted. But I also think we as women need to allow ourselves to slow down. And we have not been taught that at all. We've been taught hustle, hustle, hustle. And now, oh, by the way, get a corporate job and do all the things, and well, that's just going to lead to burnout at some point, because we can only be so many things to so many people.
Exactly. I do believe that my body was at a place of burnout to some degree when this happened. Obviously, like I said, when looking back, I can see where and why. But to your point too, I want to go back. It's very important. I 100% agree that for me, as well as whenever somebody's on a path of discovery, I was talking and working with multiple different types of people. I was talking, now granted, my case was a little bit more severe than than maybe just, I don't say the average person, but I was talking to specialists. I was talking to brain specialists. I was talking to acupuncturists. I was talking to a good friend of mine who was a chiropractor, who had a lot of capabilities with laser therapy and scans. I was talking to a specific detox therapist around how to detox, how the metals had a role. So many people, I was in a fact finding of information before I made a massive shift to move forward. And so that was something that I had learned prior. It was like my gut was telling me, gather the facts first, because if I would have done what the specialist had suggested, I will just tell you that originally they thought I had ALS potentially, which is not anything to mess around with, clearly. Then it was bounced over to MS potentially. The medications and the suggestions around that were a high level of steroids, as well as IV injections, a 6-month series of injections, not the same as chemo, but something similar to somehow try to take the inflammation down. That's what that suggestion was. The acupuncturist knew that it was a stroke and was suggesting this path. This person was suggesting this path. I was gathering information, all of the information, and then going back to the ones that I felt the most aligned with and connected with, that I felt was going to be the best for me. And that's the path I went down. And it was kind of a combination. I did walk away from the Western medicine, but to your point, I had a ton of scans. I had to rule in or rule out some things. And the technology that it is in Western medicine, that's what it's there for. I'm grateful for that information, because it ruled out a lot of things for me. So it's all about just not taking a harsh, quick action. If you have to take action quickly, like, that's understandable, but taking a step back, taking a beat to think through, like, where do I go from here? What's going to be the best source of action? And so as much as I had what I felt was an emergency situation where I'm trying to repair my hand's no longer working, my leg, I can't put my foot into a shoe, I'm limping around trying to figure out how now I'm going to run this business. What do I do? Meanwhile, my own health and fitness, and I used to be a runner. I used to run 10 miles a day. Overnight, I'm not, right? So now I'm adjusting to some things, but again, I had said I pretty much just sat down on the floor with my husband and was like, okay, this is all the information that I've gathered. Here are all the reasons why I think I have to, the stressors in my life. These are the things that we need to change. Let's sell our home. Let's get back into some nature. That's going to be important to me. I've always been a minimalist, so I don't really have clutter in my home, but it was creating and isolating specific areas in my home for yoga, meditation, my prayer, my mindfulness, my morning routines. I had a very specific, now I have an office that's in and away from other day-to-day activities so that I can focus and concentrate and be a bit more in tune with what I need to do so that I have some boundaries created. It literally was just reshaping my life and just looking at where I could clean that up. So, but the medical piece of it, it took a couple years. I'm not, that was not something again that just switched overnight like the weight loss. I've got a hyperbaric chamber in my house, oxygen therapy every single day for 90 minutes. Using a machine called the brain tap machine, which basically rewires the subconscious mind and works very specifically in and around some meditations on motor function skills. Working with these practitioners that worked together actually to kind of craft a plan that was going to be best for me in my situation. There's no way it's not a one size fits all, this shoe fits for everybody plan. This is a Jen plan based on her situation. So, and I'm grateful for that. Like I said, I'm grateful that I had the resources and the ability to kind of step back and look at that.
Yeah. And that's an amazing gift that you gave yourself, was to take the step back to analyze everything, to make good decisions, not just scared, fear-based decisions. And then voicing, and I think again, it's advocating for your health, voicing like, I'm going to work with this person and this person. Can we maybe get together and create a good plan? It's not like people are not willing to, it's just not an everyday thing. So I think when you're advocating for yourself, it is best to ask for things like that, because the more teamwork can happen, right, the better quality you're going to find in whatever it is that you're choosing as your path.
Yeah, it just comes down to personalized care. And I think that it's actually not hard. It's not difficult. And it really it's not simple, but it involves some simple measures and some simple steps. And if there is a health situation, let's say like mold toxicity or heavy metal toxicity, or God forbid, a stroke or something that's needs some immediate attention, you start asking questions. You start asking the people that you trust and and you start eliminating the things that aren't serving you and that don't feel good. And you start working with your own gut intuition on what feels good, like what feels aligned, what is something I can maintain, what is something that I can remove off of my schedule or my life to make room for this. Instead of piling more on, it was basically me making some trade-offs for some things. I didn't have much of a social life for about a year or so, because I decided that a lot of my spare time, my weekends, were going to be making sure that I got my oxygen therapy in the morning. I basically created a morning routine of reading, meditation, the meeting with myself in the morning, making sure that I was taking care of myself first, something I wasn't necessarily prioritizing prior to the situation. It really just it's a blessing, honestly. It sounds silly to say, but when people ask me like, whoa, you had a stroke, like what? You find that as a blessing? I do feel like, because now looking back on it where I'm at now, I feel like I'm much more productive in my life and in my relationships, and I can make decisions and the boundaries and the things that I want, literally based on like, yep, that feels good to me. Or no, thank you. No, thank you.
Right. And had you not gone through some of those, who knows what your life would look like at this moment. We always have to be thankful for, and I love what you said earlier, it's not, this happened to me, it happened for me, and I think just shifting the language that we use around situations is so powerful. Again, not something that we're taught, but it is so powerful. When we look at things, they could become very negative, or they could become more on the positive, upbeat side just by switching a few words, right? It's not rocket science. It's just talking to yourself in a way that is going to allow you to expand. Because when you say, how is this happening? Why is this happening for me? You're looking for evidence of things that you can do with this to grow yourself. When you say something like, why is this happening to me? That's like a downer. It's a, oh, is me, it's like such a different demeanor just from a few flip of a word. It's like so interesting. I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. I think it's very simple shifts that you can do, but it's how you talk to yourself matters.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, I mean, that's one of the biggest messages or lessons that I've learned through this, these last 10, 15 years is that exactly is how do we treat ourselves? What messages are we telling ourselves? Because early on in my life, it was a lot more of a victim mentality. I was looking at like, oh, bummer, like this happened, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to go here, or, you've got these family events or your schedule's too packed. Now I look at it as like, I get to go see so and so, or I get to have coffee with my girlfriend today, or I get to, it's all I get to. I don't have to.
Yeah, I
Just
love that
shifting
shift
some
too. It's
words.
like I get to walk in nature,
Yeah,
right?
I
It,
get to hang out with you this afternoon.
right,
Right?
exactly.
Like,
It's like just flipping. It's like even if it's something that isn't like your favorite, like a lot of people dread movement, but I'm like, there are some people that don't have this opportunity.
yeah,
And
I
so
was
look at
one
it
of
as
them.
an opportunity of growth. Like you get to pick a movement that lights you up. Nobody's telling you to do one particular thing. You get to rollerblade, you get to walk in nature, you get to go to the yoga class. You don't have to go to the gym, you don't have to run a marathon. It's again, it's just reframing how we look at things. And I think a lot of that stems from childhood, your growing up environment, being in school, having people that are around you, teachers, whatever, some are great and some are not. But at a time when you're very impressionable, when you
Mhm.
walk into a room and that you just start like taking it all on. And then now we're at an age where we're like, okay, well, what was that? And again, I didn't grow up in a crazy family of, all like these big trauma things. But when I look back and I started to delayer and body work talk or body talk work and, just different modalities, I started to see things and I was like, oh, that's where that comes from. Well, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that when I'm older. Like now that I am older and I'm an adult, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have conversations like that. I want to not talk to somebody for a week because you're upset with them. Like talk about it. Like get it off your chest, talk about it and move on, because otherwise, what is that to me? It's craziness. But
Yeah. Well, I will say that just to kind of paint a beautiful picture. So last night was a full moon,
yes.
the full moon, and so I drove. I had mentioned to you I was traveling. I went to visit my mom for a day, and then one of my girlfriends hosted this beautiful annual full moon yoga retreat, sound bath retreat that she hosts at her home. She lives on this 10-acre peninsula lake. Her home is beautiful. The setting is beautiful, and so there's like 18 of us ladies all lined up across the grass. And this, I mean, I could paint a picture. Like it's so beautiful and epic. The sky is clear. We're laying down, we're doing some intentions, doing some release. There's a fire lit. It's so peaceful. The birds are chirping, and I'm laying there on my mat, literally tears streaming down my face because I get to do this. Like I get to have movement. Some of these ladies I know, some of them are great friends of mine, some of them I've never met before. We're, all connecting and communicating or coming together. And 10 years ago, my body would not have done yoga. I couldn't move.
Right.
I didn't have the function to do it. So I do give gratitude, and it sounds simple and silly, and sometimes we take it for granted, but I think that's, the lessons for me is why I'm so passionate about this, why I do what I do now, why I'm teaching everybody and trying to be the brightest catalyst, bright light that I can for people is because this happened to me, for me to share with you, right? It's to
Yes.
share with everybody. And I was laying on that mat in tears. My left hand, I was holding my left hand like I'm so thankful that my body now is able to do this movement. It's not always perfect. I actually had a couple of trembling moments where sometimes the body just reminds me it's not perfect, right? And so, but went through this beautiful routine. We did a nature walk, a 15-minute silent meditation nature walk through her gorgeous, 10-acre property, ended it with a sound bath and a campfire around, just all talk. I mean, I know it's like the best. So
Where is this? I need to go.
northern Wisconsin. My girlfriend lives up in Rhinelander. That's my hometown. And so we had this glorious, beautiful experience. The full moon, gorgeous orange moon just rises up over the trees at the most perfect timing. Anyone wants to follow my socials, I'll have pictures on there shortly. And I'm just sitting there in awe and gratitude of like, I get to do this. And not just because I made the space and the time on my schedule, but because my mind, body, and spirit has allowed me to show up. Like I
Right.
have an opportunity to do this work, continuously remind myself why this is important. I love my girlfriend connections. I love those types of things. I'm intoxicated with this kind of work, but also to share it out for others, to find those types of things in your life that literally brings tears to your face and to your heart and to your health and to your wellness. Like find that joy, find that peace and do the things that you love, because I mean, you just don't know, right? Like you take it for granted. And I had an opportunity to chase my health backwards. And I'm just grateful that I did and learned the lessons along the way.
And I think in midlife, a lot of times it is chasing backwards. I love to support people in doing that. And I'm also super passionate about talking to younger generations so that they're not chasing as much as we've had to do. So just trying to change that. You've led into this very beautifully, but first for the people listening, what do you actually do? How do you help people? And then we'll talk about your non-negotiables.
Yeah, I mean, I do a few things. So I'm obviously passionate about infrared saunas. I do feel like it saved my life. I was able to safely detoxify the metals. And so I've kind of become a resident expert in infrared heat therapy. So that's one of my passions for sure. I also I owned a wellness center and sauna studio for many years. I closed it down during 2020 during COVID. Another opportunity that came through for me to let that go, bless and release, be grateful for the 8 years that we had it. But now I work from home, consult from home. And really my passion now is, still working with the saunas, but also teaching people how to create wellness in their life, create a sanctuary in their home, how to be your own wellness warrior or your health advocate, ways that you can look at your life. And whether it's during midlife or you've got to change or transition, or you've just decided like, this is no longer serving me, I want to make some changes. My life's work, I think, is in and around helping people find their alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure you'll share in the show notes where people can find me. But
Yeah, absolutely.
my website is basically the best place to figure out if you want to work together.
Yeah, no, all of it will be in the show notes. And, one of the things when it comes to home, when it comes to ourselves and toxicity, I'm super passionate about clean ingredients on our personal care products. We live in a society where that's not really I think it's talked about a lot more in the last 20 years of myself, being immersed into this due to a physical ailment for one of my children. As my eyes were opened, I mean, there was not a lot out there. And I kept getting duped left and right, which was so frustrating. But again, that happened for me so that I could find literally clean companies to buy from and to work with so that I could spread the word on, because toxic chemicals are toxic to our body. They're endocrine disruptors. They can get into your blood, they can cross your blood-brain barrier. Like there are certain ingredients that you should just avoid because they're not good for you. And I don't care what the front of the package says. And I teach this all the time. It could say organic, it could say all natural, it could say paraben free. You've got to flip it. You have to read the ingredients. And so when we're talking about our home, the air in your home is part of your home, right? The feelings in your home are part of your home. And so I think your program's amazing because your home is a piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Your home is a piece of wellness. And so again, if you're looking to up level your environment, then Jen would probably be someone to consider, working with because, she does a deep dive into those things. And I do think there are a lot of benefits to sauna. I think there are a lot of benefits to the oxygen chamber thing you're talking about. Some people can't afford those things, right? And so there are places that you can go to that are less expensive, but, you have to also put value on your health. And what does that look like? And how much is your health worth? And what can these different modalities and tools like a sauna do for you? Is it worth it? So I think there's always a spinoff. You want to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later, so it's like having that conversation internally. I don't think it's off the table for anybody. I just think it's reframing where you spend your money.
Yeah, what I'll say, I 100% agree with that. What I think about, so for me personally, those modalities were important for me for a specific health related situation, right? But in general, where people come at me and they're like, okay, where do I go from here? Well, harmonizing your home, the non-toxic cleaning, like that's a non-negotiable for me.
Non-negotiable.
Like, because I walk barefoot for the most part anyways, but what I walk on, what my cats walk on, what my family walk, like anything that we touches our skin or, the sheets I sleep in, all of those things need to be toxin free. Otherwise it's in my bloodstream in 11 seconds. That's not like, that's a fact. And so my cleaning products, anything that's environmentally brought into my home, it's going to be non-toxic. The second thing I usually tell people, and I mentioned it a bit earlier, is anything outside interference. If you're sitting around, like at the time, we were living next to an interstate that had a massive electrical power grid running next to us, which was kind of lighting us up basically from an EMF standpoint. So looking at different ways that you can, lower that, as well as I go real deep into not bringing electronics into your home. Don't, no TVs, no phones, no iPads, nothing that is running off of a battery or that's tied to the internet should be in your bedroom where you sleep. If you really want restful sleep and you want to give your body a break and rest and restore, those types of things should be nowhere near your bedroom. So the whole second floor of my home, which is our master suite, nothing, no phones, no TVs, nothing ever goes up there really. I wouldn't say ever, because if it's in my pocket, but when we're sleeping at night, routers off, electronics off, my house is pretty much shut down, and it's very, very low electricity. And then of course, there's other things that you can do, like, a lot of people are into crystals and different energy stuff. And I love to get into those weeds. That's a really favorite topic of mine. But ways that you can bring in a higher vibration, like what can you bring in? More plants, like take the dark drapes off the windows, bring in some more natural light. How can you bring in some things that are going to help neutralize the air? There's some really great plants, or just specific tangible things that you can bring in the home to create a higher vibration and a higher frequency. So you're just kind of like getting rid of the negative, bringing in the high vibe. So you're just raising the vibration in general. So many things you can do. But to your point, where we live, and a lot of us work from home, a lot of us are raising kids from home, a lot of us are teaching kids from home now, like our home should be our sanctuary. And so really dialing into what you can do to bring the most peace and well-being into that space is, I think it's just essential in our life. Like if we're not doing that, if you're living in chaos and clutter and you hate going home and it feels noisy and messy to you, and your bedroom is a mess and you can't find the clothes you want to wear and everything is just misorganized, your whole life is a mess. Like there's just no way that you're going to function at a high vibe level if those things are not taken care of.
Yeah, and I think that, the huge problem I see is devices right now, especially because we are all home more often. And my one lady that I see, her whole office is like soundproof and like has the walls and all the things, and everything's hardwired. Like she doesn't own a cell phone, she's like extreme, which is fine. I mean, that's great. But there are little bags you can put your cell phones in that cuts down. There's things you can put on the back. But one of the things, she had said to me was get everything hardwired. And I was like, okay, my next house, when I get to my next house, I'll hardwire. I'm not going to do it now. Well, I came home and I'm like, why aren't you going to look into it? That's so stupid. You should just at least entertain it and look into it. So I called AT&T, and for $50, they came out and switched what used to be phone lines, which we don't use, to CAD5. And now all of our laptops are hardwired when we're working during the day. So again, it is a simple shift. But I know that cuts down, airplane mode. If you are not using your phone, put it on airplane mode. There's the little bags. Again, there's different kinds of bags that you can put it in. There are meters. So if you don't know like what this is and what she's talking about, obviously dive into her content, but there are little meters that you can see like how high the frequency is in your home. And people don't understand yet the magnitude of the issues that are being created in their bodies due to that.
Yeah. I think there's more information coming out. I mean, like I said, I've been in this business or this industry for 15 years, and I dug deep because it was wildly affecting my life. But once you can't unsee and unknow things that you see. And when I do things, I go all in. Like I'm not just toe tipping. I am head first, all in. I'm going to figure it out. And again, the resources and people, it's like find the information. The information actually exists. The facts are out there. There's a lot of information in and around it. It's just not easily available. And it's hard to find. You want to find some credible resources, of course, but there's enough information pointing to the fact that we weren't brought to this earth for a pile of things and to be electrocuted, right? Like we weren't brought into, God didn't drop us here, in my opinion, to just work our tails off, to buy a bunch of things, to only be electrocuted and just stare at these devices. Like we're primal beings, we're energetic beings, we're beings that have feelings, like we're meant to have experiences, like, and the things that get in the way are these devices and these electronics. Everything is hooked up to the internet. Or hooked up to Bluetooth. And so when you take a step back and you're like, do I really need that? Do I really need to talk to my speaker? I don't know. I don't, so removing some things. I love the fact that you called and found out for $50. Like again, that goes back to just making some lists, just looking at areas of where you can clean it up. What can I do to start this process? Doesn't mean you need to throw a grenade in your whole life and start over. It just means start figuring out small steps, baby steps. But the biggest thing for me when people come, and they're like, Jen, where do I start? And I've got a home wellness checklist on the website that can, help you get started in certain areas. But the biggest questions I ask people is, are you sleeping with electronics in your bedroom? That's number one. Because if you're expecting to go to bed and when you're asking your body to rest and restore, if you're zapping it with electronics and pinging it with Wi-Fi, it is not going to show up for you in the most productive, positive, energetic way. So that is number one. And then number two is always, just kind of walking through, like, are there areas in your life, in your home, that you especially feel, to your point, you said noisy and chaotic, like actually giving you that tight feeling. And if anybody's listening right now and they're thinking of some things, that's where you start.
Exactly. Right? The first thought that comes to your mind, that's typically where you start.
If it's a person, a place, or a thing, or a situation, that's where you start, right? Is where you get that gut-wrenching feeling. And so, I mean, again, it's just kind of an unraveling. And then next thing you know, you're just living in a more peaceful situation. And then where do I go from here? It's an evolutionary process. So
yeah, it is. And I think, what we talked about today, for some people, it could seem overwhelming. And so I want to take that overwhelm off. And that's where the whole 1% shift comes in, because you're not going to be able to flip everything. And we have these conversations on this podcast so you can start to have little light bulb moments. What resonates with you, what doesn't. Take something, try it on for a week, see how it feels, leave the rest, come back, visit it later, So I think, again, it's giving yourself permission to not have, some people, like Jen, is the all in. I'm more like that, like research. I'm going to figure it out. But a lot of people, that is too much, and that is okay. We're not, right. We're the people doing the research and giving out, the tips and the tools and the things and the practices that we've seen work, that we know work, but nobody's saying you have to do them all overnight. So just give yourself grace, go with your gut, think about what you're feeling around the different areas, whatever that looks like. And then that's where you start. And then you just shift one thing, and then you shift another thing. And it's just like brushing your teeth. Eventually it becomes just a habitual thing that you just do because it feels good. Nobody wants to go out with a yuck mouth, and it's the same thing. Like, nobody wants to go out with low energy in the morning and feeling, not their best. So right. You mentioned, like, your non-negotiable being toxins in your home. So give me one more non-negotiable that you...
My prayer and gratitude every morning. That's a non-negotiable. The meeting I have with myself each day is non-negotiable. Like I said, for me, just giving gratitude that every day I wake up breathing, but just spending some time to make sure that I'm appreciating the things that I have and the people that I have and the relationships that I have in my home. But just spending a few minutes with myself in the morning and just kind of checking in. That's whether I'm traveling, which I'm always on the go and I love that. But I have a few things that go with me in my vision and my prayer book are on my hip every day.
I love that. Very good. And I think those are two attainable things that, if you're looking for some non-negotiables, you can start trying those on if it's something that's resonating with you. Maybe you don't have a practice yet. And again, a practice is just little things you put into place so that you feel your best on a daily basis. So thank you so much, Jen, for coming on, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your story, because again, I think there are so many people out there with a different story, but can resonate with your story and the steps you've taken. And you can give hope to people who are still walking the journey of trying to figure out the parts and pieces. For those who need encouragement or needed support today, I hope that you got that from this episode. And if you did not need that, but you needed some tactful tools, hopefully you took a little bit of that away as well. I will talk to you all soon. Have a great rest of your week. And thanks again for coming on. That episode had so many great takeaways. I hope you feel inspired and more empowered to make small 1% shifts on your wellness journey this week. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. If you want to leave a review, share your thoughts, and let me know how you're going to be implementing these 1% shifts into your life. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with another mama who could use a little wellness love. Want to stay connected? Join me on Instagram and Facebook at Live Life Balanced with Robin. Check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com for more resources, and grab yourself some freebies while you're there. Until next time, I hope you find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to come your way. See y'all next week. Love to y'all.